And here we go.
Welcome to the Great Work Insights Podcast by the O.C. Tanner Institute, the show that features the people, the professionals, the thought leaders, and the coolest companies. And now your host, the man navigating the discussion about the culture, the organized chaos, and the best practices that compel great work, Todd Nordstrom.
Let me ask you a question. Think about this hard. Do you know the right people? Maybe you're thinking, I know a lot of the right people. I have some pretty impressive contacts. Maybe you're thinking, I've got some close contacts that they really have my back. Well, eventually, if you ask yourself the question, do I know the right people enough? You'll arrive at a new question. Do I know the right people for what? What are you trying to accomplish? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to achieve? Do I know the right people for what? Well, do you need to know more of the right people? Actually, research says you do. The Great Work Study, conducted by Forbes Insights, the Cicero Group, and the O.C. Tanner Institute, analyzed 1.7 million cases of award-winning work across a wide variety of industries, expertise levels, and professions. The study found that 72% of work projects that win awards involve people talking to their outer circle. These aren't their close friends or their co-workers, but instead they're people that they don't know, that may not be in their industry or may not understand their profession. The study also found that people who talk to their outer circle are 3.4 times more likely to create bottom-line financial results. Of course, the question you might be asking is, well, okay, who, how, and where do I find these so-called right people in a massive outer circle? Well, our guest today not only can give you the answers, but she can give you some die-hard rules to live by. Please welcome to the show Judy Robinett, author of the book, How to Be a Power Connector, the 5 + 50 + 100 rule for turning your business network into profits. Judy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
I just want to say I'm really curious and I want to learn more about the 5 + 50 + 100 rule. But before I ask about that, and before we get the details on that, I want to ask you a much bigger question. Do we actually need to know more of the right people, in your opinion?
Absolutely. It's really important that you have quality people that can and will help you achieve your goals. Having a gazillion people on Facebook or LinkedIn won't. You need to focus on quality. And you think about that song that came out last year, all the right friends in all the right places. So you need to choose people that have a good head, a good heart, and a good gut.
Okay, so let's say that listeners are hearing this and saying, okay, I understand what you're saying, and now that I think about it, I need to know more of those people that have good heads and good hearts. And let's say I read your book and I do my homework and I'm totally on board. For the listener who might say, yeah, I get it. I don't know where to start. I'm shy. I'm reserved. I'm not good in a crowd of people. What would you say to them?
Well, you're not alone. Half of Americans identify themselves as shy, but research shows it's really only 10%. So most of us inside are going, oh my gosh, what if they don't like me? What if I don't add any value? And that's me. You know, I'm the last person on the planet you'd think would ever write this book.
Really?
I grew up in rural Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
If you saw the movie Napoleon Dynamite, that was my high school, Todd.
Oh, wow.
So I was shy. I was bullied. You know, it still kind of hurts to think about it now, but I knew no one of wealth, fame, or power. And even if I had, I wouldn't have dared talk to them, let alone ask them to help me.
So when did you reach a point where you said, you know what, I really need to understand how to connect to more people or more of the right people? I mean, was there a pain point in your life or career?
Yes. So the early one was when I was working for a Fortune 300 company, and I had my head down. I was working hard. I was just doing magnificent things on projects, but I wasn't getting ahead. And I looked around and I figured out that, you know, people hit the wall unless they know how to network. And it's commonly known in the military that you can work your guts out and you can hit major. But after that, if you don't know how to network and have the emotional intelligence, you're not going to go higher. So that was the first one. And then the second one just happened, just a few years ago, and people, I thought I was shy, and people started saying to me they'd pay me if they could follow me around to learn how to network. And honestly, I thought they were nuts. And then I taught a few of my friends, and it worked. And then the most interesting thing happened. I started having meetings with celebrities and getting calls from folks looking for, investment opportunity. I had a guy call me with $1 billion looking to invest.
Wow.
And just as an example, last week, the Assistant General Secretary of the United Nations read my book and invited me to a reception. And then the next day, I got invited to Super Agent Lee Steinberg's Super Bowl party. And, I still pinch myself that these things happen, but now I'm asked to sit on venture capital boards, corporate boards. And so I've really learned how you can create luck. And if you think about it, most things in life are a combination of skill and hard work, but the important ones are luck, synchronicity, and that has everything to do about positioning.
So let me ask you a question. Now that you've really thought this through, and you've obviously become good at connecting, is it comfortable? I mean, we're all wired in certain ways. Are you comfortable with it now, or is it still, can you kind of have to walk into a room? Because I know, I talk a lot, and I talk a lot to a lot of people, but you put me in a crowded room, and I'm probably the guy sitting in the corner and just people watching.
Yeah. And Todd, are you shy? Would you say you're shy?
I wouldn't say I'm shy. It's just, I'm just not it doesn't feel natural for me.
Natural?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm now totally extroverted, but I can tell you, so when I didn't dare ask anybody for help, I went and got the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I just started smiling, saying hello, using people's names. At corporate events, I would hide out in the corners. And so and I found out that people did like me. And then I got curious about focusing on the other people, and then it became simple. And I finally made it a game to see if I could talk to any stranger about anything. And I pulled up to a restaurant with a friend of mine, and I said, the next car that pulls up next to us, I'm going to figure out how to talk to him. And the car pulls up, and I quickly look, and I see they've got Idaho license plates. And I got out, and I said, oh, you're from Idaho. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Idaho. And I ended up in a 5-minute conversation. And so I can just tell you a little bit of practice, and just starting with, Oprah had a campaign a few months ago, just say hello. And you do that and kind of get out of your comfort zone a bit, then you get more comfortable.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get to the 5 + 50 + 100 rule. What is it?
So this is a simple system that helps you build and maintain a powerful network. Mm-hmm. And it's based on 2 or 3 laws. And the first one is Dunford's Law, which says groups fall apart at 150. Even Roman armies or units were only put in groups of 150. And if you think about it, I had a guy call me, and he had a database with 40,000 people he was trying to send Christmas cards to. And I said to him, dude, how many of those people really have your back and have your future? How many have really helped you? Well, it was less than 15 people. So the reality is you don't need gobs of people. So realize 150 is kind of that outward limit. So the bottom number 5, relationship science says that's our core family. This is our family, our close friends. They give us love and support capital. And these people we have close ties to. And the problem with that, just like your research shows, is they know all the same opportunities. They know all the same potential joint venture groups, how to everybody knows everything. Mm-hmm. So 50, I've identified as the critical number. If you have 50 people that are quality people, you can make anything happen. And so research shows your influence is limited to a friend of a friend of a friend. And so, I have people write down your network equals your net worth. It's the unwritten law of success. Jack Welch, I once heard him say, forget an MBA, learn to network. And so, a common, something I'll tell you that will change your life is you just share your goal, where you're going, what you need. And then you ask 2 simple questions. The first one is, what other ideas do you have for me? Mm-hmm. And the second one is, who else do you know I should talk to? And what happens is you get the perfectly curated information in context with your goal, and then the best people out of those people's network. And if you keep doing that, this is how I have billionaires on my Rolodex, how Mark Burnett endorsed my book. And so it is a simple system saying you only need 50 really good folks, and you can make anything happen.
That's fascinating too, because I do think people think, it's just it's a process of collecting more and more and more without actually judging quality. I'm still going back to the question before too, because as I was listening to you explain that rule, I was thinking, okay, if to take a conversation from hello, nice to meet you, and the typical small talk, how do you transfer, what's that middle piece of that conversation so that you're not going, hello, my name is Todd and here's my goal?
Yeah, well, and I think people make the mistake of the elevator pitches, which I hate. Matter of fact, I don't even like the term networking. It seems icky, manipulative. We've all been in these rooms where you feel like piranha. People are running at you with a business card. We always connect personally. There's gazillions of lawyers, accountants, anything that we do, there's lots of us. So people want to know you, like you, trust you. So initially, I just have people focus on finding common ground, building some rapport. It can be as simple as talking about what you're eating at the event or why you came, or simple things like everyone knows the weather. And then usually that will move. Mike Milken says that the things people care most about in life are their family, their finances, and their health. And I would add pets to that. And so you establish a little bit of common ground, and then usually it will be, what are you doing? And instead of doing an elevator pitch, I'll say, well, I just got this book published. I'm trying to figure out how to do book marketing. And, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, oh, you need to talk to my friend Bill. But you don't have to have that conversation initially. I mean, you want to get in the room, and you need to get in the right room. 95% of people are in the wrong room. So Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, says out of 100 people he meets, 5 are keepers, 20 he never wants to see again as long as he lives, and the rest are kind of opt-in. And so you just want to have some chemistry, see if this person is someone that you want to have in your relationship, and then follow back up with them. Send them an email, and then you can have the conversation about, here's my goals. Do you have any ideas for me? And people love to help. We're wired to help. And, the truth is 95% of the people on the planet will help you if you ask. I mean, there's a reason it's in the Bible. You have not because you ask not. I've learned that, and I didn't realize that.
Here's another.
And the other.
Oh, go ahead.
So the other thing I'll tell you is I was so shocked the first time I met a millionaire, and then the first time I met a billionaire. I was on a panel with Mark Cuban, his net worth $7.8 billion. But everybody's got problems, and everybody's got solutions. So really it is about a value match, just adding value immediately.
I'm listening to this, and I just want to play devil's advocate on the side of the listener here, because everything you're saying makes perfect sense. But how often do you find people where they're assuming that they need to know those 4 people or those 4 people? And I've been there before. I think I need to meet this person, this person, this person, and then I meet them, and nothing really happens. How do you know who to know?
Sometimes it is more critical to make sure that you're in the right room. So if you're in a room and people have the resources you need and they're smarter than you, you're in the right room. And then you can certainly talk to strangers. And many of the best connections I've had have been through those accidental talking to strangers. And that's really important. So research shows we only talk to strangers 2 to 3% of the time. And I tell people that's where the gold is. You'd be amazed how many people are sitting by you at Starbucks that have got the answer you need. So it is a combination of mining the network you already have and then also reaching out to strangers.
Interesting. Yeah. Starbucks, airplanes, all airports. Yeah.
I mean, I'm so wild now that I've been in Barnes and Noble just sitting, relaxing, and I overheard a couple of young men behind me talking about their startup, and they're pretty smart. They know what they're doing. But when they start talking about raising funding, they don't know what they're doing. And I thought, I could just help them. Just with 10 minutes, I could help them. And I turned around and I said, "Excuse me, I'm an angel investor. Let me give you some advice if you'd like it." And they said, "Please pull up a chair and sit down." Mm-hmm. And so if you can help, help.
Interesting. It must take you a while to move through an airport, huh?
Well, I don't talk to everybody. I do try to smile and be nice to people because it's a gift. I mean, that's the way you pay it forward. But I've had some tremendous accidental meetings. I was in the Ronald Reagan airport brushing my teeth, and a woman next to me came in. She had on this gorgeous raincoat, and I said, "Wow, what a nice raincoat. Where did you get that?" And I talked to her for a few minutes, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I was giving a speech." And she said, "Oh, so was I." And she said, "We ought to talk." So she gave me her business card, and she's the chairman of the National Corporate Directors, of 25,000 public directors around the world. And we've maintained a relationship. And I joke, even brushing my teeth in the bathroom at the airport.
Okay, so I'm gonna think about everyone here, because we may be talking to people. You grew up in small town Idaho, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up small town northern Minnesota. I'm guessing there are people listening right now who are thinking, "I love what she's saying, but how would becoming a power connector truly change my life or my career? What if I live in a small town where opportunities are limited? Maybe I have a job that really doesn't require me to be a connector." I know you work with a lot of companies and people. What's your favorite story you've heard from a person who followed your advice and experienced massive change?
Honestly, Todd, I get emails from people around the world. I got one from a young man in Nigeria out in the boonies. Mm-hmm. who was having trouble getting funded. And he told me by the time he made it to chapter 3, he was funded. And then recently I got one from a young man who'd graduated from law school, was having trouble getting a job. But my favorite one of all is Annette McClellan in Park City, Utah. And I was actually introduced to her. She had tried to find funding for 8 years, and she literally was in the wrong room. And she couldn't find funding. She was having trouble finding funding or strategic partners. And I taught her what I do, and within 8 months she was funded, and 2 years later she sold her company for millions. And that's a perfect example of, just frantically. And I saw this quote when I was younger, like, if you keep doing what you've always done, you always get what you always got. And I used to think, what on earth do I need to change?
Sure.
And I literally was in the wrong room. If you keep doing what you've always done. So I learned I had to question my assumptions about strangers. I had to change my belief. You don't get anywhere without other people. That's the truth. And the truth is we all kind of need each other, and we have things that we can offer. And it doesn't matter the town I grew up in was 300. And if you just start talking to a couple of people, and another thing you can do is go to your next, Franklin's 600 people now. I could go 20 miles away and go to Logan, Utah, which is 50,000 people. Well, you can find anything you want. There's always investors in every town. There's always people of power, influence. I recently, or not recently, a couple of years ago, I met a man who was recruited to Salt Lake, and he's Black and he's gay. He's not the typical conservative, white Mormon dude. And he was building a book of business, getting clients for wealth management. And I said to him, and he outdid everybody in his office. And I said to him, "How did you do this?" And he said, "I joined the symphony." So one of the things I tell people to do is volunteer for like a political group. Mm-hmm. It can be, volunteer to work with your county commissioners, a hospital board of directors, because you think about, we're humans, we group, we like to group. And so if you just start rubbing shoulders with some people of influence, then you'll have the network you need instead of hitting the wall when you need to get a job, get funded, figure out how to start a company.
Let me bring up the social media and online networking. I know people who I think they assume that because they're growing their LinkedIn database that's somehow going to pay off for them just collecting people. What have you found in that space?
I love LinkedIn. So there's now 350 million professionals, and they're on there to network. I reach out to people if I need information. I have found, people for funding deals, for, partnerships internationally. So I really like LinkedIn, and I also love Twitter. And what we're finding is it gives you access that you would have never had before.
Good. Fantastic stuff, Judy. Just an honor to have you with us. If listeners want to learn more about you or your book, How to Be a Power Connector, where can we find you?
My website's just www.judyrobinett.com. I'm on Twitter at Judy Robinett, no E on the end. Write to me, judy@judyrobinett.com, or tweet, LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect and help people with their questions. You can find my book at, any bookstore or Amazon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure.
Would you like to be featured as a guest on Great Work Insights? If yes, we want to hear from you. Leave us a comment with who you are and what you're all about at www.octanner.com. Also, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to all our podcasts on iTunes. Now get out there and build something beautiful. It's your turn now.